This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below.
So with the fallout of this game and this being obvious that the Browns are at a place to where everybody's going to be on the hot seat, there's been a lot of conversation about what Kevin's accolades mean and what that protects him from, right? A lot of times if I ever bring up Kevin potentially being on the hot seat, one of the first reactions is we're not going to fire a two-time coach of the year. Other people, when they hear that, tend to tear down his accolades and act like the two-time coach of the year thing is not impressive, but it is an impressive accolade that Kevin has under his belt. Is it as impressive as like two-time Super Bowl champion or, something like that? No, but it is something that people will look after and people will want to hire when it comes to Kevin Stefanski. So what I want to do in this video is have a conversation about what those accolades actually protect him from and what they don't protect him from, because I think a lot is getting said on both sides of this argument that aren't really close to reality. The truth is that yes, Kevin winning 2 times the Coach of the Year award, it matters. It definitely matters, and it definitely is factored into if he gets fired or not. But that doesn't make him immune like some people think that it does. Kevin winning Coach of the Year 2 times does not make him immune. Kevin, if he would have won the Super Bowl 2 times, does not make him immune. Most coaches, even the legendary ones, get fired. Like, that's just how it always works with coaches. So no matter what you accomplish as a coach, you're always 2 things away from being fired at the end of the day. You're 2 back-to-back disappointing seasons away from being fired, no matter who you are, right? If you have 2 back-to-back disappointing seasons, you could have won a Super Bowl in your first year. You will be out of there after that second disappointing season. It doesn't matter where you are, how good the organization is, all of that. It is what it is. You have 2 back-to-back disappointing seasons. You're out of there. The second thing that can get a coach fired is having a win percentage for an individual season under 300%. That gets coaches fired like crazy. Let me tell you the coaches who have been fired because they've had a win percentage in an individual season under 300%. Andy Reid got fired from the Philadelphia Eagles for going under 300 in his last year with Philadelphia. Bill Belichick was pretty much fired by the New England Patriots for going under 300. Doug Peterson was fired from the Philadelphia Eagles for going under 300 2 years, by the way, after he won a Super Bowl. It goes without saying, Bill Belichick won a bunch of Super Bowls, and obviously Andy Reid is Andy Reid. And even at that time, he was still Andy Reid. It's not like people were like, oh, we don't know if this Andy Reid thing's going to work when he went to the Chiefs. Nobody was surprised because Andy Reid was still a good coach. But those 3 got fired. Todd Bowles, also one of the few active coaches in the NFL that got fired for going under 250. I mean, not 250, 300 when it comes to his last year with the New York Jets. So from the Todd Bowles of the world to the Bill Belichicks of the world, you can win 4 Super Bowl championships. You can win no Super Bowl championships. If you have 2 back-to-back disappointing seasons, you're going to get fired. And if you go under 300 in an individual season, you could be fired. Now, there have been coaches who have gone under 300 that still have their jobs currently. Sean McVay went barely under 300. And I would contend if you're within like a 10th of a percentage point from being 300 as a coach, you basically went 300. So the rule doesn't really apply to you. But also it's worth noting the one year that Sean McVay went under 300, he was 294 in I believe a couple of years ago. It was largely due to a massive amount of injuries, and it was also a couple years after he had won the Super Bowl. Kyle Shanahan in his second year as a head coach went under 300, but that was the year that the San Francisco 49ers literally lost every active human body that they had to injury that season. So he got a pass for that. And it was his second year, and he showed promise at the end of his first year. And he was also off of an incredible run as a coordinator. So if Kevin does not get to what I think is a reasonable amount of wins for this season, and sad that it's come down to this point, that what would be an acceptable amount of wins for this season would be the inverse of what we thought would happen. But this is where we're at. We can't live in the past, so we got to live where we're at. But the truth is, historically speaking, if it could happen to Bill Belichick, it could happen to Kevin Stefanski. Right? Like, that's just, if it could happen to Andy Reid, it can happen to Kevin Stefanski. And this isn't a result of the Browns being a dysfunctional organization. I know people are going to throw that at the Browns if they do this. This is what every single organization in football does. If you go under 300, it doesn't matter who you are, you could be fired. If you have 2 back-to-back disappointing seasons, you're probably going to be fired. Kevin hasn't had 2 back-to-back disappointing seasons. He made the playoffs last year. You can argue kind of miraculously, right? Like, the Browns had an amazing amount of injuries, more injuries than the 2019 San Francisco 49ers team that gets a pass because they went under 300 because of all the injuries. And the truly ironic part is Kevin might get fired for going under 300 this year, but if he had gone under 300 last year, he would have absolutely gotten a pass because of the injuries. But this year, they're on pace to go under 300. And they're not as injured as they were last year, right? Like, yes, Deshaun Watson's still hurt. You lost DeJuan Jones. Like, the injuries are starting to pile up a little bit here, but not to the extent that they were last year. Just not even close to the extent that they were last year. So that's what gets a coach fired. So in order for Kevin to have reasonable job security, he has to get to 5 or 6 wins. Now, the Browns have 7 games left, which means in order to get to 5 or 6 wins, the Browns will have to win 3 or 4 games to get there. And they have 7 games left, so you would have to go above 500 for the rest of the season. And I will argue definitively, if they get to 5 or 6 wins, Kevin's not going anywhere. Right? If they get to 5 or 6 wins, they end the season strong, Kevin's not going to lose his job, because that would have mean that he had to beat the Steelers at least once, Denver or Kansas City. You know, you probably have to beat the Ravens. You probably beat the Dolphins and the Bengals. Like, in order to get to that win total, you will have some wins that will change how people feel about Kevin Stefanski going forward. That is not my opinion. That is just what it is. Under 300 gets coaches fired. It doesn't mean that every coach who goes under 300 shall automatically be fired regardless of the context. But I'm just telling you, historically speaking, coaches who go under 300 win percentage, no matter what they've accomplished, are usually on the block to get fired. Just what it is, right? Back-to-back disappointing seasons will get you fired mid-season, and then under 300 will get you fired. And if he goes under 300 and he does not start out fast next season, if he coached for all 32 teams and that happened, he would get fired, not just the Browns. It's important to remember that, right? Because people are going to paint some of this stuff as, oh my God, it's just the Browns who do this. This is actually the Browns functioning very normally if they fire somebody after going under 300. Doesn't mean that they should. Doesn't mean that they shouldn't. I'm not here giving you an opinion on that right now. I'm just telling you, under 300 win percentage gets coaches fired. It always does. And the Browns have a very difficult path to get above 300, right? You have to win 5. No, not 5, my bad. You would have to win 3 or 4 out of your next 7 against the Steelers, the Broncos, the Chiefs, the Bengals, the Dolphins, the Ravens. And even though the Bengals are 4-7, even though the Dolphins have a bad record, they are much better than their record indicates, because their record, well, the Bengals record looks like that because they can't close games, but the Browns can't either. The Dolphins record looks like the Dolphins record because Tua was hurt for a little bit. That is where the Browns are, right? If Kevin does not get above 300 win percentage, them coach of the years ain't going to save him. If it does, it might. Like it very well might. A good start, finish to the season, knowing that he's a 2-time coach of the year, that will save him. Now, let's have the conversation about if it should save him if he gets there. And I would argue, yeah, that would be fair if it saves him. Because what's at question right now with Kevin is, can he create a winning environment in this kind of a circumstances? Basically, can Kevin Stefanski, because he's such a good coach, provide you the floor? I think a good head coach provides you a floor of going above 300 every year, right? Your worst year is going to be a 5 or 6 win season. That's what I think a good head coach provides, right? We know that Kevin has been able to get to 11 wins twice, but the question is, what is your floor with Kevin? Kevin's gone through a lot in his time in Cleveland, right? The 2 down seasons he's had, there have been 2 very justifiable reasons for it. The first one in 2021, Baker Mayfield, his play fell off a cliff. He kept playing with a torn labrum. Baker Mayfield himself has admitted that he played because he was being stubborn and did not want to get surgery or declare himself inactive. So you kind of can understand why the Browns had a disappointing season that year. And even in that season, it's important to remember the Browns did not dip below 300. They were well above 300 that year. And in 2022, Deshaun Watson, who is supposed to be your new franchise quarterback, suspended for 11 games in 2022. You had to start Jacoby Brissett. It's understandable that you weren't going to be a world beater during that time. And even then, you still stayed above 300 win percentage wise. So up until this point, I think it's been reasonable to assume that Kevin Stefanski has successfully provided the floor that you were looking for when it comes to a head coach and his ability to provide that floor that I talked about in my rant about the Cleveland Browns, right? So up until this point, he's provided that floor. Now, this season, it looked like he's about to shoot straight through that floor. Right now, the Browns are at a 200 win percentage. If they don't win another game, they'll be well below 300, right? So if the Browns dip to there, there's obviously no saving Kevin at that point. Part of having Kevin here and part of the benefit of having the continuity here is that Kevin is supposed to provide some semblance of a winning culture. A winning culture means that you have a floor as a football team. You will only get but so bad as a football team. It's what Mike Tomlin is very famous for, his 500 floor for the Pittsburgh Steelers. No matter what they do, how much they rebuild, they will always be 500. Kevin needs to provide that floor for this team. His first 4 years, even in the down years, he provided a floor. And again, if Kevin was just having a down year where it was obvious the team was going to finish 6-7 wins, I don't think his job would be on the line. But since it looks like he might finish 3 or 4 wins, it is on the line. And I know when I look at that list, the thing that points out to me is that the one mistake on that list was Andy Reid being fired after going under 300 in Philadelphia. And I think a lot of Browns fans look at this and say, hey, we don't want to have another Andy Reid situation. And past paranoia about the Browns doing Browns things makes us feel like if anybody is to repeat that mistake, if anybody is to fire somebody who does become the next Andy Reid, it would be the Cleveland Browns, right? It's always a fear that we have about any move that we do, whether it be quarterback, head coach, that we're going to have the next Brett Favre or the next Andy Reid or whatever it may be. The thing to consider here is that if Kevin does go under 300, were there any extenuating circumstances that can excuse going under 300? I think the one thing you can point to is Deshaun Watson, right? He was really bad this year. And that led to your win-loss record being what it was overall. The way I would look at that is to say, hey, Deshaun started 7 games. You got 10 games without Deshaun Watson at quarterback. You should be able to win at least 3 of those 10 games or 4. So maybe if that's what you feel like is the extenuating circumstance for this Browns team, which I think is a completely fair place to be at. Deshaun was awful this year, like beyond redeemable. It was bad the play that he had. So if that's how you approach this, then I would look at it like this. You need Jameis to get to 3 wins or 4 wins at the very least, and you need the Browns to remain competitive in all of these games going forward, or at least most of these games going forward. You need to feel like you have a chance to beat teams that you aren't as good at, right? You need to feel like you could have upset the Kansas City Chiefs, or you could have upset the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Baltimore Ravens again, right? You need to get some of those wins and moments under your belt. But if that's how you're looking at it, I think that's fair. Then the way you need to look at it is 10 starts with Jameis. You still need to go above 300 with Jameis Winston, which would be 3 or 4 wins. With Jameis, he's already at 1, so you subtract 1 from 3. You got 2 or 3 more wins that the Browns need in order for Kevin, even with that argument considered, to keep his job. Which would mean the Browns at the very worst, and I don't know if they survive 4-13, but maybe you can make an argument that Kevin should keep his job at 4-13, and at 5-12. It's a bit more of a compelling argument. I think the argument doesn't really become undeniable until you win like 5 of those 10 games and you say, hey, look, we were 500 with Jameis Winston, right? Like, obviously it was the quarterback play that tanked us. We would have been over 500 if we were able to have some different things go down at the quarterback position. But that's just me. But if we're looking at it through the lens of like staying above the forbidden number, the 300, even in the Jameis starts, then 4 and 5 wins could potentially save Kevin's job. Even then, it'd be tenuous, right? Because you could go over 300, but if you have 2 back-to-back disappointing seasons, well, then that changes things, right? Now, what would a disappointment be for next year's Browns? We're not even close to figuring out what that even should be for this team, right? We don't know what their internal expectations are. We'll find that out, once this season ends. But that's what gets people fired, right? Mike Vrabel got fired for having 2 back-to-back disappointing seasons in Tennessee. These are the things that get coaches fired. Back-to-back disappointments, under 300. Kevin is not eligible to get fired from a back-to-back disappointment. They were 11-win team last year with 5 different quarterbacks. They overachieved. And maybe that buys him some grace into this season, just recently winning the Coach of the Year. But the grace does not get extended past maybe that 300 win scenario with Jameis Winston. Like, if you don't win that much with Jameis, if you go 200 with Jameis and you go whatever you were with Deshaun Watson, sub 200 when you were with Deshaun Watson, you finish the season at about 200 win percentage, it's likely everybody gets fired, right? So that is my view of this whole thing. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.